Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Whoop podcast, where we sit down with top performers. I'm your host, Will Ahmed, founder and CEO of Whoop, and we are on a mission to unlock human performance. This week, Whoop VP of Performance Science, Kristen Holmes, is joined by Dr. Allison Brager. She is a neurobiologist with expertise in sleep and circadian rhythms who works to examine the mind and body's resilience to extreme environmental stress. Allison serves as a member of the Whoop Scientific Advisory Council and wrote a popular science book entitled Meathead: Unraveling the Athletic Brain. The book ties the fields of exercise physiology and neuroscience with her experience as an elite athlete in track and field and CrossFit. As World Sleep Day is coming up this Friday, March 17th, we figured there would be no one better to offer up some sleep tips than Allison. Kristen and Allison discuss sleep becoming part of the core 3 pillars of a healthy lifestyle, advancements in sleep technology, understanding what sleep tech and trends are working, how to create the optimal sleep environment, tips on how to improve sleep, the emergence of sleep tourism. To make sure you're ready for World Sleep Day, check out our new blue light blocking glasses, our new Whoop sleep mask, and apparel. And also, if you're new to Whoop, you can use the code WILL when you're checking out to get a $60 credit on Whoop accessories. If you're not aware, we also have new membership pricing, $239 for an annual membership, the Whoop straps included. That's our best pricing ever. You want to see a question of yours answered on the podcast, email us podcast@whoop.com, call us 508-443-4952. Here are Kristen Holmes and Dr. Allison Brager.
Dr. Allison Brager is a neurobiologist with expertise in sleep and circadian rhythms who works to examine the mind and body's resilience to extreme environmental stress. Dr. Brager has written Military Training Doctrine on Holistic Health and co-authored the first edition of the NC2A Student Athlete Mental Health Handbook. As a former student athlete and collegiate coach, I can tell you from first experience that this handbook was probably the most important thing to happen to the NCAA in terms of forming their thinking on sleep and mental health. Allison, thank you for your contribution there. It's just so massive. How long ago did
We
you
could
write
talk
that
about it
handbook?
too.
I would love to, honestly. It's an area. I've heard some statistics thrown around, and one that relates to sleep, that across the NC2A population with student athletes, 35% of the mental health issues are related to sleep. Is that
Yep.
is that kind of what you found? Yeah, I heard that stat. It was just mind blowing to me.
Well, it actually came about so we wrote the handbook in 2015. It came about after in 2013, the NCAA had the most suicides on record in the history across all Division 1, 2, and 3 institutions. And doing investigations on what was a contributing factor, stress and poor sleep schedules kept reappearing. So they actually reached out to the Sleep Research Society. And since myself and a few others had just started going down this road of looking at sleep in athletes, because it really hadn't been done before, we contributed to the first manual. But the committee is still around. I actually am going to the NC2A headquarters in a few weeks for our quarterly board meeting. So we're hoping to come out with another edition of the handbook, after this meeting. But yeah, as the statistics show right now, sleep is a huge primary complaint of student athletes, and then it gets even worse if you're a female athlete. So if you look at male and female athletes, it's even worse, and then it's even worse mental health outcomes and sleep outcomes if you're a minority. So it's quite interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I think there is. I know we have a lot of student athletes on the Whoop platform, which is really exciting. I mean, we have entire athletic departments who have invested in empowering their student athletes with it, this kind of information. And I think for a lot of student athletes, we have a study going on right now at UCLA, and we just published the sleep characteristics, and it's looking at, we have 270 athletes, student athletes in that study, and average sleep is about 6.5 hours. It is not enough, and we're obviously, they're part 2 of the study is now we're working on interventions to try to extend sleep, and really tracking sleep consistency and providing some breathing intervention. So hopefully we kind of get them on the right side of time in bed. But this is it's a massive issue, and I think there needs to be, not to get too much into policy, but as someone who spent a lot of time on college campuses, having libraries open 24/7, bright
Yeah.
lights, cookies and Coke at 11 p.m. There's just so many things wrong with the college culture that just fly in the face of everything that I think we know is critical for short and long term kind of performance and health. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think we have to keep shouting, from the rooftops.
Yeah, well, I will say that UCLA is sort of leading the charge in these
Mhm.
efforts. So the chancellor of UCLA is a famous circadian biologist, Dr. Jane Block. And so we're actually working between the Big 10 and the Big 12 merge to develop a white paper. So it's a white paper we've been working on now ever since the merge came about. And it's just written by experts in the sleep and circadian field, and it's intended for coaches and staff to recognize that, hey, while you might be making this investment from a monetary standpoint, think about the consequences on not just on the field performance, but these students' grades too.
Yeah.
It sort of gives like a plan of action in terms of
Mhm.
things they can do to mitigate this. I did a
Mhm.
little bit of this work during the football season with Michigan State and their basketball team when they went to the University of Washington for games. But
Mhm.
I will say that's awesome you're working with UCLA because Dr. Block and the athletic department recognize this is going to be a challenge that's ever increasing with the merge.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been wonderful. The study's been going on for, gosh, a year and a half now, and we're just adding the football team, and yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm around it, and some really interesting findings. So, yeah, excited kind of for this part two to see if our interventions, really work.
No, I'm excited for you too. I would love to see. So years ago, we did a longitudinal wrist actigraphy assessment in Towson University's football team,
Mm,
like preseason, during season, and postseason. But, this is using the graveyard devices. So, like, the clinical sleep watches that just simply
mhm.
look at activity patterns, not to say they're not clinically relevant. It's just,
Right. It's
it's
not
has
quite as
no
good.
aspect of biometrics.
Right.
And so I'd be curious to see how close the parameters are to, um, but obviously what you have is way more comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be good. We also got permission to look at GPA as well. So we're trying to see if we can replicate some
Cool.
of the findings from Andrew Phillips' paper in 2017 in Nature that saw a relationship between GPA and sleep consistency. So, or his metric is, he used a sleep regularity metric, but really excited to kind of see what we find, and most importantly to see if we can get those kids spending more time in bed, and getting more quality sleep.
Exactly.
So I've got some sleep stats for you, Allison, from Whoop members in 2022. So for folks who are on the platform, you get an option of kind of putting in if you want to peak, perform, or get by. And, that's
Uh-huh.
based on, Whoop's going to tell you how much time you need to spend in bed. That's your sleep need. Not a random number generator, folks. And we can talk a little bit about the research that kind of in a backhanded way prove that sleep need is not random, but your sleep need, you can kind of, basically, if you want to meet 100% of that sleep need, you're peaking. If you want to meet 85% of that sleep need, you're performing. If you want to meet 70% of that sleep need, you're getting by. So of the folks on the platform, 16.5% of the year our members are spent peaking. 25.4% of the
Okay.
year, yeah, they're kind of performing, and 30.3% of the year they are getting by. And we currently
Uh-huh.
have another metric, not enough, and 27.8% are not getting enough sleep over the course of the year. So, what do you make of those numbers?
Well, I mean, that's just the human mindset though, right? Is like we each have an invincibility complex that's somebody else's problem. That's not my problem. So I think that's part of it right there. But I will say I don't think all hope is lost because I would put money that most people on the platform already have better sleep habits than the general population. I
Totally.
think a lot of times when we work, you and I work with elite athletes and elite military, we forget what general population is like. And then especially when you
Yeah.
go in the clinical world, you definitely forget just how unhealthy Americans can be. It's not until we recently did like a large scale epidemiological study for the Army, and like even in the conventional Army on the reserve and guard side, you see like how unhealthy they are compared to the conventional Army or the special forces, like who I work
Yeah.
for. So I don't think all hope is lost. I think, I mean, obviously, though, you guys do the right things, set up those sleep challenge campaigns, connecting the
Mhm.
community with professional athletes and hearing success stories about people changing their lives by changing their sleep habits. So I think next year, maybe there'll be a positive delta.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem that it's kind of weird. We're going through these like, there's like phases of change, where you kind of like recognize there's a problem and you're like, all right, I need to kind of change it. And I think I think folks have recognized that sleep is important. I think people believe that. I think there's enough evidence out there. There's been enough conversations with, folks like Dr. Russell Foster and Matthew Walker and yourself and Dr. Huberman. I mean, people are, really screaming from the rooftops that sleep is the foundation of human health and performance. And whatever we try to layer on top of that is going to be inefficient if we don't have this solid foundation. So I feel like that's out there. But sleep can be hard for a lot of folks. And,
Yep.
Allison, you've worked in, the most extreme environments, with military operators and I would say professional athletes at times and collegiate athletes,
Yep.
really have to deal with a lot of pressure and a lot of, travel and, eating at weird times that, throws off their circadian rhythm. And there's all sorts of barriers, I think. So what are some of the learnings kind of from those environments, these high stakes, high stress environments that we can apply to just the regular folks in terms of inspiring, kind of the behavior change and what is like if there's just a bit of a framework that people can grasp onto, what would you say it is?
I would say number one, it's having, no matter the circumstance, having a sleep friendly environment and a bedtime routine. And you might
Mm,
have to get as creative as possible with this. A few years ago, we went with a high tier unit to their overseas deployment to basically set up their environment in a way where they could actually get some decent sleep. And they were all armed with a sleep kit pretty much too. So they had an eye
mm,
mask, they had earplugs. We even invested in like little portable sound machines because when you're trying to sleep next to the flight path, which I can tell you is not fun. I had that unfortunate circumstance when I was deployed. You're definitely going to need a noise machine or earplugs. We
mm.
took out their incandescent light bulbs and replaced them with red light, or went to the commissary and bought some red lighting kits, or ordered them on Amazon. But it's the same thing. Professional teams are doing this now too. A few years ago, when I was a sleep consultant for LSU's football team, we did that in their locker room. We spent millions of dollars to reconfigure and remodel their locker room, where each athlete had their own sleeping pod or napping area where they could go before practice or before the game and wind down. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the year we did that was the year that LSU won the national championship.
I
But
love it.
again, all of
It's
that
always
comes down to routine.
I love it. I was just gonna say, like, it's so funny, like, when, I think about the Washington Nationals, it's all of a sudden they win the World Series and, sure enough, they had this whole revamp of their sleep. It just never
Through
ceases
Dr.
to.
Singh. So,
Yeah, Dr. Singh, dude, I
yeah,
love her so much.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
same thing
she's
with sleep, the Capitals too. So
yeah,
she was busy with the Nationals, so she referred me to be a sleep consultant for the Capitals that year. And sure enough, the
nice.
Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup that year too. So I don't think it's a
I see a
coincidence, you know?
theme. It's not a coincidence. I love it. Yeah, it's so exciting. Yeah, we have some really cool examples too, just on the Whoop platform. Well, of course, the Nationals were wearing Whoop, and I know many of the Capitals wear Whoop as well. And a lot of our collegiate teams who are totally dialed on sleep and, are in that performing kind of range consistently on average over the course of their season and are keep, sleep consistency is in that upper 85 to 90%. I mean, they just don't get injured and they don't get sick. And I think
Yeah.
winning is really about availability. And that to me is the opportunity with sleep that I don't think people really understand. It's about being available for life. And I think for me, like I haven't missed a day of training in years because I haven't been sick. I haven't been
Yeah.
injured. Right. And,
Yep.
and a lot of that is just dialing on your sleep. And I
Yep.
and I understand, sleep can be hard for a lot of folks, but I think, if you're not sleeping well, like getting help is so important because it's just it's worth the time and effort, because how much time, Allison, is wasted when you're not kind of getting the requisite amount of sleep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll take a military study we did. Well, it was a replication of a military study that was actually done in the 90s during the Gulf War, using, again, the graveyard active watch that a lot of sleep clinics used to have back in the day. But we use this metric called combat effectiveness, which basically means like how well you perform on a military task. So if you look at sleep within a 24-hour period when soldiers are doing training exercises, you can't really look at nighttime sleep in those conditions, right? Is because
Right.
in military training or deployment, you get sleep when you can. But in general, soldiers who were sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night leading or the day before they did that military training, they performed optimally. They were at 100% combat effectiveness. The soldiers who got 6 hours of sleep, so what is that, 30% less sleep than normal, were at
Mhm.
50% combat effectiveness. And then the soldiers who got 4 hours
Wow.
of sleep, which is half the amount of sleep, were at 15% combat effectiveness. We actually use that data to change Army doctrine about how much sleep commanders were mandated to give soldiers in the field from it. But yeah, like bottom line is, cutting your sleep by half the amount you need, you're going to cut your performance by 85%. So it's not a
Yeah.
linear relationship, it's exponential.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see that. I think, you and I have talked about this before, but the study that we did with McKinsey, their executive leadership program, and one of the metrics that was really interesting is that, or one of the correlations we saw was the folks who were not meeting their sleep need, so had accumulated 45%, 45 minutes of sleep debt. Their next day mental control was reduced by 10%. So
Yep.
this was measured via Stroop and MBAC. So you know, sleep need is a thing.
Yep.
One of the areas on Whoop is it does kind of accumulate, and it's important to pay down that sleep need, kind of in small chunks. And I'd love to talk a little bit about this. I think good segue to talk a little bit about night to night variability, and
Sure.
what are the kind of safe thresholds, because I think what happens is people don't meet their sleep need over the course of 5 days during the week. And then on the weekend, they try to make up for it. So they extend their sleep by five
Mhm.
hours. They're sleeping until noon.
Yep.
Um, and I think that probably, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that has some deleterious effects on all sorts of different types of functioning in the human system. So, what is kind of how should people think about if they do accumulate a lot of sleep need, which is a lot of folks on our system, how do they pay down that sleep debt in a way that doesn't actually have a negative effect on performance levels?
So ideally, it's the 30-minute rule. This is actually the rule that people who practice cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia give to their patients. So, for those on the line, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is the most effective form of treatment for insomnia. It's not drugs, it's behavioral intervention where you work with a sleep trained expert to dissect your bedtime routine and your sleep and wake schedule. Basically, these patients have to keep sleep diaries over the course of 2 weeks,
Mhm.
and then you sit down with your therapist and they go through it. Um, so 30 minutes is the rule because if you think about it, the circadian system, right? It's impacted by shifts and behavior, particularly shifts in when you wake up, when you go to sleep, and when you're exposed to light. Um, and anything beyond an hour is stressful. So if you half that, then do 30 minutes, it's less, it's minimal stress to the circadian system. So typically, for example, if you have a patient who has insomnia at sleep onset, then he or she will work with their therapist to night by night extending their sleep by 30 minutes at a time. And it might not even be every night, it might be every 2 nights. So you go to bed 30 minutes earlier this night, and then 2 days later, you go to bed 30 minutes earlier from that time the second night. So you're already at an hour. You do this gradual advance in the time at which you go to sleep, or a gradual delay depending on, what kind of insomnia it is. But 30 minutes is the golden rule.
Yeah. Maybe for folks who are trying to go to bed a bit earlier, how do we want to try to move that window for of time when melatonin is released? People need to start thinking about that the moment they wake up in the morning, right? So maybe just walk through a couple behaviors that can help advance sleep onset. And then if people want to delay sleep onset, what would the time, how does the timing shift there?
Sure. It's pretty easy. If you want to advance your sleep onset, you get bright light exposure early in the morning. If you want to delay your sleep onset, you get bright light exposure after the sun has set, and that will delay it. This is based on what we know of the like mammalian circadian clock. It's called the technical term is a PRC, a photic phase response curve. So this is something that the early days of circadian biology that scientists basically spent 2 decades dissecting this photic phase response curve. And it doesn't matter if you study it
Yeah.
in animal models or humans. The human work was done in constant conditions, so actually in a cave, to be honest with you.
Right.
Um, it's the same. Light in the morning
Mhm.
for advancing, light in the evening for delaying.
Yeah. Yeah. So light, obviously the strongest entrainment signal. And then also obviously light is hitting the control center of the brain. But there's other behaviors that we can do that also entrain the clocks. So they'll go, they kind of affect the peripheral clocks. Food, so meal timing, so potentially shifting or like, restricting food earlier in the day as opposed to later in the day could also work. Exercise timing. I know the research is a little mixed here, but
Yep.
that
No.
could be another
Yeah.
lever.
Exercise timing too.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then caffeine is the other one that we wanna make sure that we're not having caffeine, right? Do you have I know you've done a lot of work in the area of caffeine and sleep.
I have. Yeah. And actually, what's interesting about the caffeine work is that caffeine can antagonize the light depending on what time it's administered. My
Mhm.
colleague, she did that for her dissertation when she was working with Dr. Wright out of UC Boulder. So yeah, there's a lot of factors to consider, but that's why, there's apps, and also, the algorithms that you guys provide can help
Mhm.
you figure out when to do what.
For
I would
sure.
say, and I think you'd agree with me, the protocol for shifting when you travel, because you travel all the time too, is
Yeah.
light plus melatonin plus exercise. Like those three things
Mhm.
will really, really help you. I did that
Yeah.
a few weeks ago when I came back from the
Yeah.
Australian Open. It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
I do it all the time, and we
essential.
do it with our athletes too, if we have the ability, depending on game times, yeah, we're actually, um, we're working on a manuscript right now where, yeah, we basically have the control group. They went to the West Coast from the East Coast, and just we're all over the map in terms of light exposure, meal timing, and exercise timing, match timing, and then the experiment group basically maintained their East Coast timing of all these kind of circadian behaviors. And preliminary data will
Yeah.
not surprise you, but physiologically, these folks were, had really no change in HRV and no change in resting heart rate. They were able to maintain, they block light when they need to block light, they viewed light when they need to view light. to maintain their East Coast time. And they,
Yep.
not surprisingly, performed very, very well, had very small, no perturbations in their physiology, and, had same amount of time in deeper stages of sleep. So it's, I think that we can pull these levers, whether it's, we're staying in our own time zone and it's just kind of a social jet lag situation, or if in fact we're trying to
Uh-huh.
mitigate, mitigate or opt out of jet lag altogether, if our schedule allows, or
Right.
accelerate our ability to adapt. So yeah, I think it's cool that I think that more of these protocols are kind of getting out into the wild and people are able to take advantage of them, so they can kind of control their levels of alertness and sleepiness. Maybe we can kind of press on light for a second, just in that 3 to 4 hours, before bed. I think people maybe don't realize the impact light has on kind of every organ and tissue and cell in the body. And when we're viewing light at a phase, or at, during the inactive phase of a circadian rhythm, just how detrimental that is to our health. So maybe talk a little bit about, you know, light exposure after the sun goes down. And, blue light blocking glasses gets us, a little bit of the way there, but we still have to really dim our environment and, limit the stimulation from light. So maybe just talk about, I know there's some really interesting research, looking at, individuals who view light between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. Dopamine system next day doesn't work as effectively. Um, Obviously insulin sensitivity next day, ghrelin, leptin. I mean, there's all sorts of kind of problems. Do you want to just kind of dig into that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole body response. It's going to be the endocrine
Mm,
system. It's going to be a cellular response. It's obviously going to be performance. And I think,
mm,
clinically, where we see that the most are in shift workers. There's a reason why the World Health Organization views shift work as a level 2 carcinogen now, because years and years of having that light exposure from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. can lead
mm.
to cancer metastatic cell growth. Um,
Yeah.
it's the same thing if you look at I know there's some studies. I'll just use animal studies because
Mhm.
they are still the tried and true example of the impact of light on the mammalian circadian clock. It doesn't matter if you're a human or a rat; it's the same system. Um, but we used to do studies all the time where we would house animals in constant light, which is also extremely disruptive to them. They suffer from the same consequences as humans. They have
Mhm.
increased cancer cell growth, increase obesity, uh,
Mhm.
insulin resistance, but they
Mhm.
also become super
Fertility.
volatile and aggressive. So, in like very social creatures like hamsters, they become super nasty when they're housed in constant light. And then if you give them things like drugs of abuse, because that's a lot of what I used to do is look at how alcohol and cocaine affects circadian rhythms.
Mm.
They like go after drug seeking and reward seeking behavior. So again, the
Right.
dopamine system becomes
Yeah.
hijacked.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's the same way with craving fatty food, high fat, sugar food too, in shift workers.
Yeah. It's like really sobering. It's one of those behaviors though that for the most part, many of us can kind of control. But I get mad at
Yeah.
society sometimes, that we kind of have normalized this just, extension of the day, and of course I research all things circadian, so I'm kind of in this world nonstop. So there's that bias,
Yep.
but yeah, yeah, I kind of, it's funny, when I was working at, when I was a collegiate coach, I had to actually counsel my student athletes through conversations with their study groups because the study groups would want to meet at 11:30 p.m. or 1 a.m. even. And my student athletes are like,
Yeah, that's
I need to
ridiculous.
sleep. It's just stupid, right? And hopefully times are
Yeah.
changing, but um but yeah, I mean there was just like this pressure to be awake, and I think institutions have, drive a lot of that and can help, change that culture, but it's kind of a cultural thing that we have, and there's
Oh,
just
it
this
is.
constant
Yeah.
accessibility, So I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know how to
No,
change
it
it, but
totally is. Yeah. I mean, I think again, like those elite populations, athletes and military, they're more apt to having a cultural change. In fact, there's a whole shift in the paradigm as we speak. I think it's more of a challenge for the general population, and that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think so too. I definitely, we kind of, again, work in similar circles, but, I feel like, yeah, professional athletes, military, I feel like there's the awareness levels have just totally skyrocketed around this. And I think the recognition that, there are competitive advantages to gain, if people can get a hold of these behaviors and, rework
Uh-huh.
schedules and whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
People still have to do though.
Well, I do think it relies on corporations too. I actually was just reading this
Yeah.
article yesterday about the history of UPS in the New Yorker, and it's about, UPS has made so much, all those delivery services have made so much money since the pandemic. And so a lot of UPS workers are striking now because the company has made so much money and yet there haven't been raises. And I didn't know this, but a UPS worker in Mayo, Minnesota makes just as much as a UPS worker in New York City. So a lot of these UPS workers in New York City have been on protests because a lot of them have to wake up at 1 a.m. to take 2 trains and 2 subways to get to their shift at 4 a.m. And so they've actually been like picketing and, using their union to send letters to the corporations about like changing work hours, or at least paying them
Yeah.
more so that they can live closer to their delivery stops.
Wow. Yeah, that is real. Yeah, just the cost of living. I mean, it's just not even close, you know? Wow. Well, it's good that they're making those
Yeah.
changes
I
and
mean,
it's good that people are advocating for themselves.
right. I mean, you see the same with fire too. I work with fire departments in DC and Boston, and cost of living in DC. I used to live there. It's ridiculous, but I had
Yeah.
government housing for it. But there would be firefighters who would work in Northern Virginia, but have to be forced to live in West Virginia because they couldn't afford to live around
Mhm.
the wealthy area where they were firefighters. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's up to the organization to change, not, the actual people.
Yeah, totally. All right, so are there any kind of things that are like trends that are out there related to sleep that just get under your skin that are like total myths, like not true? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I think one thing that's gotten under my skin recently is I learned that
I
you
love
can
that
get
part.
a certified sleep coaching certification by listening to a 45-minute lecture about sleep from a strength and conditioning coach. I did this like certification just to see like what it was. And I knew it was bogus the minute that this coach was talking about stage 4 non-REM sleep because okay, there used to be in the old American Academy of Sleep Medicine like 4 stages of non-REM sleep. But
Mhm.
that guidance changed like 15 years ago. And I don't
Literally.
think, they clearly got their information from Wikipedia or
Yeah.
some like outdated
Yeah,
source.
yeah.
So like as soon as
Yeah.
they said that, I
Mm,
was like, okay, I'm done here. But that's really been, I think, getting under my skin is the
yeah.
amount of like lack of vetting that social media does with sleep advice that these
Yeah.
sleep certified experts give, or even just people in the health and wellness industry.
Mhm.
I do think like, for example, the National Academy of Sports Medicine is doing a good job trying to
Mhm.
dispel that these charlatans because they
Yeah.
have like a coaching and wellness certification now which focuses on sleep, but they had experts like us write the textbook and write the actual
Mhm.
educational content. So I do
Right.
think there's, fitness and health experts out there who are providing accurate information, but for every one of those, there's 5 who aren't. And a lot of them go
Yeah.
back to melatonin, right? Like how
Yeah.
melatonin, if you take it every night, it is going to improve your sleep, or it
Yeah.
replaces the endogenous release of melatonin. Just, bad and
Yeah.
wrong advice. So that's what's been getting
Yeah.
under my skin recently.
Yeah. I have just being in the space and seeing a lot of people truly, truly struggle with sleep. It's not an easy behavior, uh, and have
Right.
huge amounts of empathy. How, as someone who's spent their entire career like thinking about this, what would be like if you're talking to someone, and I'm sure you've had just a gazillion of these type of conversations, with someone who is just like, I can't fall asleep, I can't stay asleep. What would be your kind of first thing that you'd say to them, or like what would be your kind of series of thoughts that you could give them to kind of help, or yeah, what would be your advice, I suppose?
Well, this happens to me every day because, I do work
No.
for the military and I work with people who've, pretty much been at war for the last 17 years. This is like the first time in their
Yeah.
life in 17 years where they're not actively in combat. Um,
Yeah.
so first thing is sleep routine, right? That goes back to what I said in
Mhm.
the beginning. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing the 2 hours before bed? Um,
Mhm.
Oftentimes I find out they do a high intensity workout in their garage. And I'm like, what are you doing a CrossFit workout 2 hours before bed? Um,
Yeah.
you know, TV in the bedroom, right? That is
Mhm.
like you're asking
It's
for
the
sleep
killer.
disruption with a TV in the bedroom. It just makes it too easy. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. When it comes to middle of the night insomnia, um, it depends. Like if they're waking up because they're really hungry, I've actually seen that a lot, right? Because I work with guys who are going through like high intense
Yeah.
training.
Mhm.
I make sure that, at least before bed, they're getting in a casein whey protein that has slow release
Mhm.
and is going to keep them through the night. But if they're
Mhm.
simply just waking up because their brain wants to be up, um, again, psychology of sleep, go in the other room, do not turn on lights, and just, do breath work or,
Mhm.
some routine that is relaxing so you can go back into the bedroom and sleep. Like,
Yep.
don't
Yep.
do anything with your phone or anything.
Right. Because you don't
Or
want the
simply
bed.
just sleep the other direction on the bed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to associate bed with something that's painful and, and disruptive, right? So you kinda get out of the environment, reset, and then come back. Is that the
Yep.
reasoning behind a different environment? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But those would be my two big things.
Yeah. So, the we a a lot of folks I talk to, I mean, a majority of folks are like, "I wake up at 3 AM, I wake up at 2 AM," like, and it just might be the age bracket I'm in, it's just, common. Um, what would you say, I mean, a lot of the conversation I have when we kind of unravel it, it seems like it's just a lot of stress accumulating throughout the day that hasn't really been proactively dealt with.
Yep.
That seems to just
Yep.
rear its head. I think a lot of these folks are exhausted, so they end up falling asleep, but then they wake up. And so, what would be your advice throughout the day, to kind of take a proactive approach? Because I mean, most people can incorporate, I would say, moments of rest throughout the day, with breath work, whatever. But do you have some things that you kind of recommend for folks who are, where we think it might be kind of anxiety and distress accumulation that's waking them up in the middle of the night?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to work and, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, I'm a firm believer in the Pomodoro technique. Are you familiar with that? It's a productivity technique that the Italians put forth many years ago, where basically you work in 15 to 20-minute bouts at a time. And every 15 to 20 minutes, when you're doing highly engaging, stressful things, you take like a 2-minute break. Just
Mm,
walk around, like totally
mhm,
disengage. And you do
mm,
that for 3 cycles. So 15 minutes, 20 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 3 cycles, and then you take a full on 45-minute break. Um, I think those little things like just disengaging, going out into the sunlight, or, we live
mm.
in New England. So just going into a different
Yep,
area
yep.
of the house or the workplace, and talking to colleagues, just walking around,
Mhm.
getting
Yeah,
removed from your work. Just doing that
yeah,
a simple 15 minutes a day can make all the difference in the world.
yeah. And, you mentioned the pre-bed, just a book, that's not super stimulating, can also kind of help with sleep onset and journaling.
Yeah, book,
Do you look on those things? Yeah, can
journaling.
be
I
helpful,
mean,
right?
even a lighthearted podcast. I'm sure this would,
Yeah,
as long as you're keeping the light on your phone completely
right.
with no
Completely
brightness,
dim.
like I do all the time.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I always
Mine's
if I have to
dark
look
all
at it,
the
I
time.
tilt it.
Nobody can see my phone.
I know. I know. I have one of those films on it too. Yeah, it's um, yeah. Well, that's really helpful. I wanted to touch on naps. And it was crazy. 94% of the folks on the platform, if I go back to it, 96.8 of our members took a nap this year. And the
Took a
average
nap?
nap, yeah, I
That's
know.
awesome.
That was mind blowing to me.
Dang.
I know. I mean, I'm really really fortunate. I feel very alert during the day. I don't need a nap. You keep my sleep that low.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought this was insane. But the nap it averages an hour and 41 minutes. So just talk a little bit
Oh, wow.
about. I know. I was blown away. So talk a little bit. Maybe these are happening on the weekends. There's a lot of questions I want to ask these data, but that is all I have. Um, what is the architecture of just the perfect nap, just to make sure
Sure.
people are kind of deploying these in a way that's not hurting kind of their nocturnal sleep cycle? And yeah,
Yeah.
how would you lean into that?
So it's 20 to 30 minutes under like optimal sleep conditions. So if you're somebody who's normally, let's say, getting 80% of your sleep need or 70% of your sleep need, so enough to get by, like your metric
Yeah,
a night, a
yeah.
20 to 30-minute nap can help offset that sleep debt. The only people who should be napping longer than an hour are shift workers, and particularly
Mhm,
people like firefighters and first responders who
mhm.
do 24-hour or 48-hour continuous shifts. We
Right.
recommend for them, they go home after their shift, sleep for 2-3 hours because that's all their body's going to allow. And then in the afternoon, they
Yeah.
take an hour and a half nap. Um,
Wow.
Anyone who's able to nap for longer than an hour a day, that to me is a key indicator of sleep debt. Um,
Totally.
and so I guess when you talk about the architecture of a nap from a sleep perspective, most of that sleep is going to be like lighter stages of non-REM,
Mhm.
but you will hit some REM sleep because during that time in the afternoon, the circadian clock dips our core body temperature, which is
Mhm.
going to favor REM sleep. So it's
Mhm.
mostly night or light non-REM sleep, but a little bit of REM
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. And you mentioned, so I think folks should know too, cortisol, it doesn't have a circadian rhythm, but it kind of oscillates like a circadian rhythm. And your kind of low point
Yep.
of cortisol is obviously it's peaking kind of throughout the morning. And then I think 1 p.m., 2 p.m., it's going to dip. So
Yeah, it
that would
starts
be
dipping
the
down.
perfect
Yep.
moment to kind of take that's siesta time. That's a perfect moment to kind of
Yep.
take a little nap. Yeah. So, but just making sure that it isn't longer than, probably 30 minutes. Um, I think
Yep.
pairing it to, one of the recommendations we make, Allison, you're a science advisor to Whoop and have been for many years, and we're so grateful for all the
Oh, I'm
contributions you make
grateful
to
to
our
be a part
company
of it.
and helping advise us. Yeah, another one of our advisors, he kind of coined the term non-sleep deep rest. Do you have some thoughts on,
Yep.
yoga nidra, kind of these mind body scripts? Is that something you
Oh,
prescribe
yeah.
to folks that you're working with?
Yeah, yeah. I've done a little bit of a research deep dive once. It was for some presentation at Walter Reed on sleep and meditation. So expert meditators can voluntarily and activate slow wave sleep while they're meditating.
Mhm.
Most of
Yeah.
us cannot do that. But yoga nidra is a wonderful practice. I actually, a few years ago, there was a special yoga nidra retreat with the disciples of the Dalai Lama at Esalen in Monterey. So my college roommate and I went and we learned how to do yoga nidra for 5-6 days, multiple hours a day. And I remember after that week, the next week I slept really well, but I also felt like I could have gone a whole week without sleeping because I
You're so
credited
rested.
so much sleep during that those 5 or 6 days. But no, yoga nidra is a legitimate practice, and as the science
Yeah.
shows, there's only a few studies. The EEG, the brain waves of someone who's in that state looks no different from somebody who's
Yep.
sleeping
Yeah. I think it's so powerful. I
once they
know,
get the hang of it.
yeah, I work, I kind of serve as a high performance consultant for my son's ice hockey team. So, and
Oh yeah, you
last
were
year,
telling me that. I love your idea about the shower, the red light in the shower when he comes home from
yep, yep. So I
practice.
have them like
Yeah.
totally optimized. Yeah. But it's
Is
funny.
it?
I guarantee none of them listen to this. So I think I'm safe. But it's funny. Like I sent them a yoga nidra script that I actually did for my student athletes when I was at Princeton, toward kind of the
Oh,
back end of
cool.
my career. And yeah, yeah. And so those poor boys, yeah, they have to listen to my mind body, my yoga nidra script, but they don't know it's me. So, but it's really funny. But it's funny. The boys and and a lot of the professional athletes that I have kind of talked to and worked with in the past, have said that it's such a great kind of stepping stone to napping. Because
Yep.
it kind of is like a beautiful entry point that is it's simple. It doesn't it's low stress because you're just listening to a script and you're kind of following along. You're not like stressed about, oh my god, am I going to be able to fall asleep? And I
Uh-huh.
think just like that um skill of being able to wind your body down and kind of just relax into that state is just an awesome gateway to kind of that next step of. I was thinking it's like a gateway drug. When I say gateway, I
Yeah.
didn't really mean to say that, but it's kind of a nice gateway into napping.
Yeah.
Um, but
No,
uh,
it kind
but
of
yeah,
is a gateway drug into napping. Like
yeah,
it, I mean, that's what it is. It's got a napping.
yeah, yeah. Cool. So one of the other interesting things in terms of the data on our platform. So 3% of our we saw a rise in shared bed behavior, 2022 compared to 2021, and 3%. And it seems
Uh-huh.
that our members sleep better when they're sharing a bed with a partner. What's your thoughts on this, and kind of what does the research say there?
I mean, that just might be oxytocin, right? Like oxytocin is
It's like trust.
the hormone of trust, love, and feeling good. Like I think
Yeah,
that's probably what it is. I mean,
yeah.
you're familiar with those studies and dolphins and birds, how they have unihemispheric sleep, where one half of their
Hmm.
brain is awake and the other half is asleep,
Yep.
and the side that's awake is facing danger on the outside. So
Uh,
um, apparently humans have it too. Like if you sleep
wow.
in an unsafe environment,
In a
there's
hotel, like
been
half your
a study
brain.
came out. Yeah, yeah, hotel
Uh-huh.
current biology study. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. So, yeah, I know
So
it's
I
it's
think
super
that's what it
fascinating.
is. It's like love,
Yeah,
trust, and the feel good
yeah.
effects of oxytocin.
Mhm. What about pets? I know Winston, my sweet, sweet dog, falls asleep with me every night, and then
Yeah.
he leaves at some point. Um, but yeah, I just love having him having him right there when I fall
Yeah,
asleep.
I mean, I think it's the same thing with pets too. I mean,
Yeah,
to me,
they have the
they're
same effect as
just
humans.
like,
Yeah,
they're family, right? Yeah.
totally. Yeah. Cool. So one of the last things that we wanted to pick your brain on is the emergence of sleep tourism. I love this. Booking a hotel.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, yeah. So these luxury resorts have basically, have the rooms that are outfitted in these smart mattresses, essential oils,
Yep.
masks, and like all these other amenities that, promote good sleep. And love this. Like I
Yeah.
want to only go to hotels like that. I was recently
Yeah.
in a hotel this past weekend, and there was like a wedding going on. So the patio was just like so loud. And I was like,
Yeah.
how is this even happening? And it was like 10 o'clock. But, I was like trying,
Yeah.
I was in bed at 8:30 trying to sleep. I'm like, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting my room moved to like the other side of the hotel. But,
Good.
but yeah, sleep tourism.
No, I didn't know there's a term now for it, but I will tell you. So when we did that study with Elite Unit and like came up with those sleep kits, I actually had the idea for the like that kit from the American Platinum Lounge. So the Amex Lounge, I don't know, there was one time I went into the lounge in Charlotte, and actually I still have the lavender spray from it. I don't know why it's still here, but they like gave you like this kit with
Nice.
like lavender spray and an eye mask and like earplugs, and was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this is a great idea.
I know,
So
it's the best thing ever.
yeah, I have seen those. I think the West End was like one of the first to adopt the sleep friendly room. But no, that's awesome. It has a term
Right.
now. I'm going to use that, sleep tourism.
Sleep tourism. I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it so much. Yeah, I'm always like, I definitely try to always book my room that I'm like, hey, I want to, not by the elevator, not by the stairway. Like the other thing that drives me
Yeah.
absolutely bananas are the doors. People, uh, have kids, so we'll go to tournaments like ice hockey
Yeah.
tournaments and softball tournaments and basketball tournaments, and you've got the kids who are just like they put the little lock thing so the door like
Yeah.
slams on it. Well, just the doors in general are so darn loud.
Yeah.
I was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so they need to fix that too. It's part of the sleep tourism, um, movement.
Well,
Cool.
I will say, maybe you need to find somebody who's a government employee to book your hotels. Because if you book hotels at the military rate, a lot of times you get the corner room away from the hotel, because for us, that's actually like an operational security requirement is like, so
Oh,
anytime I travel with the government and I stay in a commercial hotel, I have to like automatically, the government has rooms reserved on the outside perimeter of the hotel that's closest to the stairwell, because that's the easiest means of escape. I'm dead serious.
no
So I
way.
sleep in the corner, like the corner of a hotel, anytime I travel.
Dang. I need to like enlist today so I get
And
preferential.
that's what's gonna get you, you know.
Yeah. Cool. So, well, I feel like we've covered so much. Okay, if there are 3 tips you could offer anyone to simply get a better night's sleep, regardless of their situation, what would you say is your like top
Mhm.
3 go-to?
Top three, put away your work at least 60 to 90 minutes before bedtime, or whatever stresses you out in the day. Put it away, have the woosah, Zen moment, and just, 2, dim the lights. If you don't have dimmers, use candles. That's what I have to use here at my place in North Carolina. And number 3 is dark, cool, and quiet. So dark
Love
room,
it.
cool, and quiet. Unless you live in a busy area, then
Love it.
noise machine.
Well, Allison, this has been such a fun conversation. Just appreciate you so much. Where
Of
can people
course.
find you
It's
to
good to
follow
see you
your
again.
work? You've written, I know, it's really good to see you. And you've written some sensational books too that I really want to make sure people, Meathead, Unraveling the Athletic Brain. And obviously you've been an author on so many different, publications, so people can look you up in ResearchGate or Google Scholar. But what's your favorite platform for people to follow you?
Instagram's fine. I'm pretty good about checking my
Okay.
messages on that. I would not say LinkedIn. I try to avoid LinkedIn. So, uh, just because, like my work days are so busy that I try to have like a good work-life
Mm.
balance. So, you know,
Mm. Yeah.
um,
And
but
Instagram's so
yeah, Doc
fun. It
Chalk
has like
is
this
easy.
lightheartedness to it.
Yeah, it's fun. Exactly. So even
Yeah.
if it's work, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Right, exactly.
DOCJOCKZZZ. So
Amazing.
Thank you to Dr. Allison Brager for coming on the Whoop podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of the Whoop podcast, please leave a rating or review. Subscribe to the Whoop podcast. You can check us out on social at Whoop, at Will Ahmed. If you have a question you want to see answered on the podcast, email us, podcast@whoop.com. Call us, 508-443-4952. New members can use the code WILL, get a $60 credit on Whoop accessories when you sign up. And with that, have a great week, folks. We'll be back next week. Stay healthy and stay in the green.